The first wrong thing that reached our desk was not a warning about the end of the world. It was a traffic closure on Cortlandt Street that had not been posted yet. That is what bothered me. Not the future date in the header. Not the clipped emergency tone buried under the voice. Not the phrase continuity failure, which none of us understood at first. It was that little closure, a boring Atlanta traffic detail read in the same flat delivery we used every night when a lane got blocked by a wreck, a utility cut, or a water main repair. The voice said Cortlandt would be closed between Auburn Avenue and Edgewood Avenue because of falling glass from a damaged office tower. It gave a time, a detour, and a warning for pedestrians near the Georgia State University buildings. Then it moved on to weather. 72 degrees downtown, heavy rain by morning, flood watch along Peachtree Creek, no panic, no music. No movie nonsense. Just a future emergency feed talking through routine damage that had not happened yet. I had been on the overnight national desk long enough to distrust anything that arrived too neatly. Real mistakes are usually messy. A wrong file gets loaded into automation. A producer sends the wrong local cut to the national queue. A caller with a calm voice tells a fake story to a tired newsroom. A board engineer tests a backup chain and forgets to label it. That is where my head went first, because that is where a serious person's head should go. The audio came into our system at 3:17 in the morning, Eastern Time, during a slow block between national headlines and our regional weather check. I was sitting with a cold cup of coffee, 2 producers, 1 board operator, and a stack of police and fire logs from Atlanta, Birmingham, Nashville, Charlotte, and Jacksonville. The country was asleep enough that every strange sound in the room felt louder. The producer across from me lifted one finger, told me to hold, and pushed the feed into my headphones. The voice was already halfway through a report dated 17 years ahead. The first full sentence I heard was about a Fulton County court ruling scheduled for later that morning. It named the judge. It named the case. It named the order being lifted. That case was real, but the court had not opened yet. The docket update had not been published. Nobody outside the court, the attorneys, and maybe a few staff members should have known the exact language. The next item said a state transportation official would resign before noon after an ethics complaint became public. That official was still asleep somewhere, probably with a phone on his nightstand and no idea that his name had just come through our board from a date that had not arrived. Then came a cargo train derailment outside Fostoria, Ohio, with 3 cars carrying industrial solvent, 2 road crossings blocked, and no confirmed fire. I wrote all of it down. I did not believe it. I just wrote it down because disbelief is not the same thing as permission to ignore evidence. The room changed after the substation fire item. That one was close enough to feel dirty. The future voice said a power substation in Tucker would trip offline after a transformer fire at 6:42 in the morning, causing rolling outages across parts of DeKalb County and a section of Gwinnett County. It told residents not to call 911 unless medical help or active fire response was needed. It told dialysis patients on home machines to contact backup providers. It told traffic crews to prepare manual control at several intersections along Lawrenceville Highway. It was exactly the sort of practical, ugly information that real emergency people care about. A hoaxer usually wants a reaction. This audio sounded uninterested in being believed. It sounded built for use. My first order was simple. Nobody aired a word of it. Not one sentence. I told the board operator to isolate the recording and save every second with the raw timestamp intact. I told one producer to pull the court docket, not call the court yet, just pull what was public. I told the other producer to check freight alerts, local fire logs, transportation feeds, outage maps, and public safety scanner summaries without using the words future or time. I called engineering from the desk phone because I wanted that call logged by our own system. I asked where the audio entered. Was it a network file? Was it a live insert? Was it attached to a test package? Was it from a backup line? The engineer on duty laughed once, because he thought I was talking about a bad ad spot. Then he heard the recording. He stopped laughing. Here is the part people still get wrong when this story gets retold. We did not know the future at 3:20 in the morning. We had an audio file that claimed to come from 17 years ahead, and that is all. A claim is cheap. A convincing format is cheap. A calm voice is cheap. Specific detail is harder, but it can still be faked with access luck or insider information. I had covered elections, storms, power failures, shootings, bridge closures, disease alerts, and every flavor of official confusion. I had seen smart people believe wrong things because the wrong thing arrived in a clean package. So I treated the broadcast from the future the way I would treat a leaked document from a state agency. Preserve it, verify it, limit access. Do not reward the leak until it proves itself. Engineering traced the first entry point to a distribution server that should not have been active. At that hour, the server handled backup audio packages for affiliates when the main live chain failed. It was not connected to an open public upload page. It did not accept outside calls. The file had no normal user account attached to it. Its metadata was trash in some places and perfect in others. The time fields showed a date 17 years ahead. The checksum logs showed it had arrived clean. The routing log showed it had touched 3 nodes in under 4 seconds, 1 in Atlanta, 1 in Dallas, and 1 in Northern Virginia. The engineer said that was impossible in the way people say impossible when what they really mean is that the system was not designed to explain it. At 4:08, we heard a second segment. This one did not enter through the same path. It came in through a separate monitoring recorder used to capture public emergency alerts from around the region. We were not on air with it. We were listening in-house. The voice gave future station identifiers, future traffic closures, future hospital diversion notices, and a weather update that mentioned Tropical Storm Imogen moving inland near the Gulf Coast. There was no storm named Imogen on any active forecast list that night. It also included a public service message about reducing response. Contamination caused by premature disclosure of downstream event packages. I played that sentence 3 times. I hated it each time. It sounded bureaucratic. It sounded written by people who had already learned the hard way that telling people the future changes what people do next. At 4:31, the court items started to move, not publicly, quietly. One of our legal stringers knew a clerk who would not talk on the record but would confirm whether a ruling was expected when the courthouse opened. The answer came back in a way that made the room go still. Yes, a ruling was expected. Yes, the judge named in the audio had it. No, the public docket did not show the final order. No, the clerk had not heard the exact wording. The wording in the future audio matched the draft title our stringer had heard from the hallway. That was not proof of time travel. It was proof that the audio knew something it should not know. There is a difference, and that difference mattered for about 2 more hours. The substation fire happened at 6:42. I know people want me to say it happened right when the future voice said it would, with the newsroom staring at a clock and whispering. It was less clean than that. The first public outage notice hit at 6:44. A fire dispatch record showed the first call at 6:43. The utility contact later confirmed the first internal alarm at 6:42 and 20 seconds. That was close enough. The morning commute was already waking up, and the outage map grew across the same sections the future segment named. Traffic lights went dark along Lawrenceville Highway. Drivers called in. Local television helicopters started circling. By 7:15, nobody in our room was laughing, but nobody had permission to say future on air either. The Ohio derailment happened while we were still arguing over the court ruling. A freight train left the track near Fostoria, Ohio, before 8 in the morning Eastern Time. The first public reports were vague, which is normal. Railroad companies do not hand out full details in the first minute. Local responders closed 2 crossings. The fire department reported no active fire. The number of involved cars changed twice in the first hour, then settled close to what the future voice had read. The chemical name was not exactly the same in the first reports. Then later shipping papers used the more precise industrial name from the audio. That is when our senior producer said something I still remember because it was the last normal sentence from that night. He said, "We may have a source problem bigger than the story. We had a fight in the newsroom around 8:30. It was not loud at first." Newsroom fights usually begin with everyone pretending the same rules still apply. One producer wanted to air a cautious note about unusual, unauthorized emergency audio and asked public agencies for comment. Engineering said that would reveal too much about the chain. Legal said we could expose ourselves to liability if we withheld actionable safety information. Another editor said we could cause harm if we aired a future warning and people acted on it before it was real. I kept asking one question: what can a listener do with this information that will not make the situation worse? If the answer was nothing, I did not want it on air. If the answer was specific and immediate, we had to consider it. The court ruling came out at 9:12. The future audio had said 9:10. The judge's language matched close enough that our legal producer left the room and came back with his hands pressed against his face. The resignation came at 11:48, 12 minutes before the future segment said noon. The state official used different words, but the reason matched. By then, the first clips had leaked inside our company, not to the public yet. To executives, affiliate managers, legal counsel, a former federal communications regulator, a cybersecurity firm, and at least one person who had no business knowing anything. That is how every sealed room fails. People do not leak because everybody is evil. People leak because fear makes every person believe his own exception is justified. At noon, we received the third future segment. This one mentioned us. It did not use a radio name. It used our Atlanta network operations address, the street, the floor, and the emergency stairwell on the south side of the building. It said the facility would be evacuated after a verified downstream report conflict during a regional continuity failure in the southeast. It advised staff not to move through the lobby after 9:22 at night. It said roof access was restricted. It said emergency fuel deliveries would be delayed by traffic control problems on the downtown connector and Interstate 20. It gave no cause, no explosion, no attack, no disease. Just enough to make every person in the room imagine a different disaster. I refused to air it. That decision made sense for about 30 minutes and then became one of the most hated choices I ever made. I had a future warning about our own building and I kept people working. That sounds cold when you hear it clean. It was not clean. The warning itself said the evacuation was connected to a report conflict. If we evacuated because of the warning, we might create the report conflict. If we told every employee to leave the building, somebody would tell a spouse, somebody would tell a friend, and within an hour social media would claim a bomb, a gas leak, a government raid, or a coming attack downtown. Then thousands of people could move for no verified reason. A warning can be useful. It can also become the event. We built the first verification rule on a whiteboard that still had weekend sports notes on it. The rule was ugly but clear. 1. The claim had to be specific. 2, it had to be near term. 3, it had to be actionable without requiring belief in the future. 4, disclosure could not reasonably increase the odds of the event. 5, no names of private citizens unless the person was already part of a public safety instruction. That last one mattered later. People think they want names. They do not understand what a casualty list does before the event happens. It turns every family into an emergency operation with no command structure and no facts. By mid-afternoon, federal people were involved. I will keep this plain because there are still arguments about what was lawful and what was theater. A communication security team wanted logs. The Federal Bureau of Investigation wanted chain of custody. The Department of Homeland Security wanted classification authority. The Federal Emergency Management Agency wanted all actionable disaster items. The Federal Communications Commission wanted to know whether the public alert system had been compromised. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention sent a liaison after a future segment mentioned hospital respiratory triage in Macon, even though no disease event had been reported. Everyone had a real reason. Everyone also wanted control. The public learned about the broadcast at 3:16 in the afternoon, not from us. A clipped piece of the Ohio derailment segment appeared online with the future date removed. At first, people treated it as a routine leaked emergency report. Then somebody matched the timestamp to posts made before the derailment became public. Then somebody else found a cached copy with the future date still in the header. Within 20 minutes, the words future broadcast were trending across every platform that still pretended to organize truth. By 4 o'clock, financial accounts were pushing fake lists of coming market moves. By 4:30, a mayor in Ohio had to go on camera and ask people to stop driving toward the derailment site to prove or disprove a time signal. That was the first national emergency, not the signal itself, the reaction. Markets moved on rumors before any real future financial report aired. A small biotech company spiked because a fake future health segment said its drug would be used in emergency rooms 6 years later. A regional bank dropped because somebody claimed a future closure notice named it. Police departments started calling newsrooms asking whether any future crime warnings included their city. Hospitals asked about mass casualty forecasts. Parents asked whether school names appeared. Pastors, lawyers, mayors, sheriffs, traders, truckers, airline dispatchers, and random guys with microphones all wanted a piece of tomorrow before dinner. At 5:10, we went on air with the narrowest statement I could live with. I said we had received unauthorized emergency-style audio containing claims about public events. I said several claims had matched events that later occurred. I did not say future as a fact. I did not say time travel. I did not say prophecy. I said our newsroom would not publish unverified claims that could cause panic or interfere with response operations. Then I read 3 public safety items already confirmed through present-day channels. Stay clear of the derailment area near Fostoria. Avoid dark intersections in affected parts of DeKalb County. And expect court security delays near the Fulton County Courthouse. It was boring on purpose. People hated it instantly. Calls flooded the desk. Some were angry. Some were scared. Some were quiet in a way that stayed with me. A woman from Cobb County asked whether her son's name was in the future reports because he drove a fuel tanker. A man in Macon said he had a wife on oxygen and wanted to know whether the power would fail. A nurse in Augusta asked whether a future hospital advisory mentioned staffing shortages. A police captain from Chattanooga asked if we had anything about a bridge closure. Most people were not asking for secrets because they wanted money or drama. They were asking because normal life already contains enough risk, and for one day it seemed possible that risk had a schedule. At 6:02, another future segment arrived. It was worse because it was useful. It described a multi-vehicle crash that would happen near the Brookwood interchange during heavy rain around the evening commute. It named lane directions, likely fuel spill, and a projected closure window. It did not give private names, it gave a clear instruction. Reduce speed before the curve, avoid unnecessary lane changes, and stage tow units north and south of the interchange before rain intensity increased. That was actionable without saying the future told us. Traffic engineers could act on weather risk alone. We called the Transportation Operations Center, framed it as a risk advisory from multiple reports, and pushed a general caution on air. No future language, no countdown. The crash still happened, smaller, but it happened. 2 vehicles spun. A box truck clipped the median. There was a fuel spill, but it did not ignite. Traffic cameras showed drivers moving slower than normal before the crash because our caution had reached enough commuters. The closure lasted less than half the time the future segment predicted. That should have felt good. Instead, it made the next segment unstable. The future feed that arrived at 7:14 referred to the prevented full Brookwood event and then glitched through 3 different closure durations. The voice repeated itself, not with static, with contradictions. Northbound cleared at 8:20. Northbound cleared at 10:40. Northbound remained blocked into morning. 3 versions, same voice, same calm delivery, cut into one another. That was when the hard truth arrived. We were not receiving a fixed future. We were receiving reports from a future that had already been affected by earlier reports. Maybe the signal came from one timeline. Maybe it came from a chain of futures responding to changes we had made. Maybe those words were too fancy, and the real answer was that our actions polluted the data set. I did not care what physicists would call it later. In the newsroom, the logic was simple. If we acted on a report, the report might change. If we ignored a report, people could die. If we aired too much, public behavior could create new emergencies. If we aired too little, people would accuse us of hiding lives behind professional caution. No option stayed clean. The first fake death list appeared after 8. It used the layout of our internal transcription system, but it was not ours. It named 43 people who were supposedly going to die in a bridge collapse in Tennessee 2 days later. There was no such confirmed future segment in our files. It did not matter. Families called police. Police called state transportation officials. State officials inspected bridges under pressure from people who had already decided silence was proof. One man drove 4 hours to pull his brother off a night shift at a warehouse near Chattanooga. The brother lost his job for leaving. The bridge did not collapse. The fake list did not kill him, but it damaged his life. That was day 1. That was before the real list started leaking. At 9:22, our lobby became a problem, exactly the way the future segment had warned. Not because of an attack, not because of fire, because people came to the building. Some wanted answers. Some wanted loved one names. Some wanted to accuse us of selling the future to the government. A small crowd pushed through the front doors after a rumor claimed we had a live terminal showing every death in America for the next 17 years. Security locked the elevators. Staff moved away from the lobby. The south stairwell, the one named in the future audio, jammed when employees from 2 floors tried to leave at once. The evacuation warning had been real, but the cause was public reaction to the warning, which had leaked because the warning existed. I stayed in the studio because the room was quieter than the hall and because leaving would have made me useless. That is not bravery. It is triage. A host who leaves during a national panic becomes another rumor. I could hear people in the corridor arguing with security. I could hear a producer telling a young intern to sit on the floor away from the glass. I could hear my own voice in the headphones, delayed through a monitor, reading verified road closures while the country screamed for tomorrow. We gave police only the parts they needed to manage the crowd. We did not give them future names. We did not give them the phrase continuity failure. That phrase was already doing enough damage inside the building. The continuity failure in the southeast began with power, but power was not the whole story. Heavy rain moved across Georgia, Alabama, and Tennessee that evening. That much was normal. Summer storms cut power all the time. A transformer fire in Tucker had already strained part of the system. Then demand jumped in weird places because future rumors pushed people into bad decisions. Families charged electric vehicles at the same time so they could flee if needed. Grocery stores kept refrigeration and lights running longer for crowds buying water and batteries. Data centers and broadcast facilities switched to backup routines after federal security advisories. Hospitals topped off equipment. Emergency operations centers opened. The grid did not fail because one wire snapped. It failed because too many people tried to protect themselves at once. At 10:11, a future segment arrived that was mostly unusable. It named a water pressure drop in Clayton County, a transformer overload near Marietta, 2 hospital generator fuel delays, a false active threat report near Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, and a regional communications overload caused by future report-seeking behavior. I underlined that phrase on the transcript. Future report-seeking behavior. People chasing warnings created enough calls, traffic, police movements, and data load to become part of the emergency. We had a future broadcast warning us that asking for future broadcasts was hurting the response. We changed the format before midnight. I stopped letting executives write soft language. I stopped letting federal liaisons bury useful facts in process. I also stopped letting producers sneak dramatic lines into copy because they sounded important. Every update had to pass the board rule. Is it specific? Is it near term? Is it actionable without belief in time travel? Could it increase the event? Does it name a private citizen? If it failed, it stayed out. I read that rule on air in plain language because people needed to know we were not choosing secrecy for fun. I said we would not read future death names. I said we would not read market predictions. I said we would not read crime details that could turn neighborhoods against people who had not done anything. That made enemies fast. Traitors called us criminals. Political people called us selective. Online crews said I was obeying a federal script. Federal people said I was saying too much. A sheriff in northern Georgia accused us of withholding a warning that could protect his county. A hospital administrator accused us of scaring staff into calling out sick by admitting the future reports existed. A mayor demanded everything about his city and then threatened legal action when we refused. I did not blame all of them. I would have wanted the same thing if I sat where they sat, but wanting the whole feed did not make the whole feed safe. Around 1 in the morning, after nearly 22 hours awake, I heard my own voice from 17 years ahead. That is the part I still do not enjoy describing. The future segment opened with an emergency continuity intro, then my voice came in older, rougher, slower, reading an apology. I knew it was me because I knew the little defects, the breath before a hard word. The flat way I say Atlanta when I am tired. The future version of me said the first protocol had failed because public trust collapsed after selective disclosure. Then the audio broke and restarted with another version of me saying the first protocol had saved an estimated 12,000 lives in the initial cascade. Both versions used my voice. Both sounded real. Both could not be fully true at the same time. I did not play it for the room right away. I took off one side of my headphones and sat there with the paper transcript shaking a little in my hand. I am not proud of the shaking, but I will not clean it up. You can spend your whole life in news telling yourself that the story is outside you. Then a future version of your own mouth starts reporting your mistakes back at you, and the distance is gone. I still did not believe in destiny. I believed in consequences. Those consequences now had my voice attached to them. The physicists did not arrive as a clean rescue. They arrived as tired people on calls, then panels, then secure video conferences full of bad audio and careful words. One group from Georgia Tech said the signal did not match normal transmission behavior and might be information leakage across a closed temporal curve. Another scientist from Massachusetts said that phrase was being abused and nobody should speak with certainty. A federal laboratory team said the audio packets showed no path through known public networks before insertion. A retired satellite engineer said the routing logs suggested a system receiving a file from itself after a 17-year delay, except the system had not existed 17 years earlier in its current form. Every answer brought another problem. The most useful scientist was a woman from a university in North Carolina who refused to talk fancy. She asked what changed after each disclosure. We showed her the timeline. She did not try to prove time travel. She treated the feed as a prediction system contaminated by intervention. She said if a weather model changes after new data, nobody panics, the model updates. But if human beings know the model includes their own future choices, their reaction changes the next model. I almost stopped her for the wording because I hated anything that sounded polished. Then she said it plainer. You are not reading tomorrow. You are touching it. That line went into my private notebook, not on air. By the second morning, the country was divided into 3 camps. And all 3 were dangerous. One camp believed every leaked future report. One camp believed none of it, and treated safety warnings as manipulation. One camp believed only the pieces that served whatever the person already wanted to do. That third camp became the largest by noon. If a future segment said a city should avoid a highway, people who distrusted the government called it a plot to trap drivers. If a segment said a storm would weaken, people who wanted evacuation funding called it suppression. If a market rumor said a company would crash, people who had short positions treated it as sacred text. The future did not end argument. It gave every argument new material. The White House address came at 12:30 that day. It did not help much. The president said federal agencies were investigating unauthorized future-dated emergency communications. He avoided the word future until a reporter shouted it from the room. He said no government agency had confirmed time transmission. He also said certain technical elements were classified for national security. That sentence did damage the second it left his mouth. Classification may be necessary, but frightened people can hear it as confession. By 1 o'clock, leaked posts claimed the government had been receiving future broadcasts for years. I had no evidence of that. The lack of evidence did not slow anybody down. Our 4th major verified report saved people and harmed people at the same time. It predicted a chemical release at a cold storage facility outside Savannah after a refrigeration failure and a valve mistake. The future segment was specific enough to act on. We contacted state emergency management, local fire command, and the facility operator. The company denied any issue. The fire department sent a unit anyway after state pressure. Workers found a pressure problem before the release became severe. That part saved lives. Then the facility name leaked. Nearby residents self-evacuated onto roads already slick from rain. A minor crash injured several people. One rumor said the chemical cloud had reached a school. It had not. Parents flooded the roads. Saving lives was real. The secondary harm was real too. That is where simple moral slogans died for me. Tell the truth is not enough when a partial truth changes the event. Protect the public is not enough when the public is not one body with one mind. Let people decide sounds noble until millions of people act on unverified fragments at the same time. Trust officials fails when officials are leaking, classifying, arguing, and panicking too. I still believed people deserved facts. I also believed facts had consequences that spread beyond the first listener now, not because facts are bad, because timing, context, and behavior matter. A tornado warning before tornado saves lives. A false or unstable tornado warning during rush hour can put people into the exact roads you need clear. The future feed got stranger after Savannah. It stopped giving only events and began giving advisories about our advisory process. Do not publish individual fatality projections. Do not publish financial discontinuity notices. Do not provide location-specific crime projections to non-command channels. Use present-day verification language for infrastructure risks. Avoid countdown formatting. Those instructions angered everyone who thought the future belonged to him personally. They helped us. The instructions matched what we were learning by pain. Countdown formatting caused crowds. Names caused targeted panic. Crime projections caused innocent people to be watched, confronted, or driven out. Financial notices caused runs before any event occurred. The worst call I took came from a man in Alabama whose daughter's name appeared on a leaked school casualty list. It was fake. We knew it was fake because the format did not match any real future segment and because the school district named in it had changed its building plan years earlier in the future feed. That did not matter to him. He was outside the school in his truck with other parents. And he wanted me to say on a live line that his little girl would be okay. I could not say that. I could say the list was not verified. I could say the district had no present threat. I could say police were asking parents not to block the road, he said. That is not the same thing. He was right. It was not the same thing. It was the only honest thing I had. By the third day, time had become a public resource nobody knew how to ration. Cities asked for future weather first. Governors asked for future infrastructure failures. Police asked for future violence. Public health agencies asked for outbreaks. Farmers asked for frost dates and crop disease. Airlines wanted mechanical incident forecasts. School districts wanted threat lists. Insurance companies wanted disaster claims. Families wanted death notices. Churches wanted proof of miracles. Conspiracy groups wanted proof of control. Criminal groups wanted enforcement gaps. Every request had logic inside it. That was the trap. The future feed seemed useful to everyone, so everyone became willing to damage it. We received one segment that named a woman in Birmingham who would be killed by a man with a protective order against him. That sentence sat in the secure transcript queue for 18 minutes while lawyers, police, federal liaisons, and producers argued. It failed our private citizen rule. It also made every person in the room sick to withhold it. We did not air her name. We sent a narrow present-day safety advisory through law enforcement channels, immediate welfare check, protective order enforcement, address withheld from general circulation. Officers reached her before the man did. He was arrested after trying to enter the property. That success leaked too. Then thousands of people demanded that every future crime victim receive the same treatment. We could not provide that. The feed did not provide that. The country did not accept that answer. The first anti-future protests started outside federal buildings and newsrooms, including ours. The signs did not all say the same thing. Some said stop hiding tomorrow. Some said stop changing God's plan. Some said no future without consent. Some said release the lists. Some said burn the machines. I understood a few of those signs more than I wanted to. A society can tolerate uncertainty because everyone shares it. Once uncertainty becomes uneven, trust rots fast. If a trader knows tomorrow and a worker does not, the worker is not living in the same country. If a governor knows a flood path and a mayor does not, local government becomes pretend. If a newsroom holds a death warning and a family learns afterward, every apology sounds empty. That afternoon, we got the first clear mention of the 17-year source. The segment called itself a Public Continuity Archive Relay dated 17 years in the future. It referenced a national protocol created after initial report contamination events. It said future emergency feeds were being transmitted upstream because the original generation of warnings had failed to preserve enough life and institutional continuity. Then it included a warning that upstream disclosure had already created divergence in multiple regions. The word upstream became the new word everyone argued over. Were we upstream? Was the future downstream? Could the downstream future survive us changing it? Nobody on air was allowed to guess. Off air, everyone guessed. I kept thinking about the boring traffic closure from the first segment. Cortlandt Street, falling glass, a detour. That detail had been useful because nobody cared enough to weaponize it. It did not move markets. It did not name a child. It did not give a politician advantage. It told pedestrians where not to walk. The smaller the information, the safer it seemed. The larger the information, the more people tried to own it. That shaped our second protocol. We would favor local, practical, short-horizon alerts over grand future claims. We would treat big strategic predictions as hazardous until present-day evidence supported them. We would not tell the country where it would be in 17 years. We would tell a driver where a flooded ramp was closing in 40 minutes. The federal government hated that protocol until it needed it. The turning point was the Memphis hospital fuel warning. A future segment said 2 hospitals would face generator fuel problems after a supplier rerouted trucks based on a false future rumor about road violence. We did not air the hospital names. We contacted the State Emergency Operations Center, the hospitals, and the supplier. The supplier admitted dispatchers had changed routes after reading leaked posts. Police escorted the fuel trucks through a different route. Both hospitals stayed powered. No public panic, no crowd at the loading docks, no viral video until after the threat had passed. That became the model, though nobody wanted to say a newsroom had built it before the agencies did. Our building stayed under partial lockdown. Staff slept in edit rooms, offices, and under desks. Food came from vending machines, then from a grocery run escorted through a back entrance. Nobody complained much because complaint takes energy and we had spent all of it. I read updates every half hour, then every hour, then whenever something cleared the board. My voice started to go rough. People online said I sounded guilty. They were partly right. Not guilty because I had done one clean wrong thing. Guilty because every choice had a cost and I was the voice attached to it. A host becomes the person listeners blame, trust, and pressure when the situation gets frightening. The continuity failure reached its closest point on the 4th night. The future feed warned that Atlanta's emergency communications network would fragment after a power cascade, a data center cooling problem, and a false airport incident pulled response units away from the actual infrastructure. Failures. That is a dry sentence. The reality was busy and stupid and human. A fake post said a future report had named a threat at the airport. Police moved extra units. Traffic slowed near the terminals. A storm cell dropped heavy rain over the north side. A data center outside Alpharetta lost a cooling unit, then a backup unit. One of the backup generators at a county communications site failed during load transfer. A contractor with the right part was stuck behind a crash caused by people trying to leave early before a rumored curfew that did not exist. We had the future segment in hand before all of that unfolded. It gave too much. It named the airport rumor, the data center, the contractor route, the communications site, and the time window. If we aired it, half of Atlanta might move toward or away from those places and make access worse. If we withheld it, response commander might miss the chain. So we broke the rule in a controlled way. We did not broadcast the details. We put the right pieces into the hands of specific present-day operators and then aired broad public instructions. Do not go to the airport without a confirmed flight. Do not self-evacuate based on unverified posts. Keep roads clear for utility and fuel crews. Use text for non-urgent check-ins. Conserve phone battery and check on neighbors without calling emergency lines unless real help was needed. That hour was the closest I came to losing faith in ordinary people, and then ordinary people pulled it back. Some ignored us. Plenty did. But enough listened. Tow truck drivers staged near key junctions without being asked twice. A church in Decatur opened its parking lot for utility trucks because the main road was clogged. A grocery manager in Sandy Springs shut down rumor talk in the checkout line and put our public instructions on the store speakers. Amateur weather spotters sent present-day reports that helped separate real flooding from future panic. A hospital maintenance supervisor in Clayton County heard our generator warning and checked a fuel pump before it failed. The system was strained, but it did not snap that night. At 2:46 in the morning, the future feed corrected itself. That is the only way I can describe it. A new segment arrived with the same 17-year date format, but it no longer said Atlanta communications had failed. It said regional degradation contained. It listed delays, outages, injuries, and one county dispatch center that had to transfer calls for 51 minutes, but it did not use continuity failure. The room did not cheer. We were too tired and too careful, but I saw people sit down with their whole weight for the first time in hours. We had changed something. Or the future had changed around us. Or the report had always included the chance that we would act. No answer was safe enough to celebrate. The next morning I read a statement that upset almost everyone and remains the only statement from that week I do not regret. I said the future feed was not a replacement for judgment. I said we would not treat any future-dated information as certain. I said verified future reports could help reduce harm only when present-day people used them with discipline. I said the public should assume any leaked list of deaths, crimes, market moves, or private names was dangerous until verified through present-day channels. I said no one had the right to demand a name just because fear made the demand feel righteous. I said saving lives would sometimes require not satisfying curiosity. That last sentence followed me for years. The backlash did not fade. It organized. Channels popped up to trade leaked future fragments. Some were fake, some were real. Some were real but outdated by the time people acted on them. That last category hurt the most because it made true information seem false. A road closure report from a changed future sent drivers away from a safe route and into a flooded underpass in South Carolina. A real but obsolete commodity report caused farmers to dump stored grain contracts at a loss. A crime warning from a diverged segment led neighbors to harass a man who never committed the projected act. He had the same name as the person in the future report, lived in the wrong city, and still had to move. I started saying stale future on air, and the phrase stuck because people understood spoiled information better than physics. A future report could be stale. It could have been valid before an intervention changed the event. It could be partly valid. It could be valid for one city and wrong for another because people heard the leak in one place and not the other. We built public language around that because language controls behavior. If people think the future is a script, they obey or rebel. If people think a future report is a hazardous forecast, they treat it with caution. That difference saved us from some of the dumbest reactions. Not all, some. By the end of the first week, the feed had become useful for emergency work and dangerous for public behavior at the same time. Officially, it remained under investigation. Practically, every serious emergency operation wanted access. The secure transcript process expanded into a joint review cell with newsroom representatives, engineers, federal officials, state liaisons, scientists, and lawyers. I stayed in the public role because people knew my voice from the first night and because I had been skeptical in public. That mattered more than credentials. The country did not trust experts as a group by then. It trusted scars, consistency, and reluctance. I was reluctant enough to be useful. The review cell was not noble every minute. People fought. A market regulator wanted all financial content sealed. A disaster official wanted full infrastructure access. A civil liberties lawyer wanted public logs of every withheld item. A military representative wanted location data for future attacks, including events outside the United States. A state governor threatened to bypass the process if his office did not receive raw feed segments. My position was simple and made everyone angry. Raw feed creates raw panic. Complete secrecy creates elite panic and public revolt. Filtered release creates accusations from both sides, but gives operators a chance to reduce harm. It was not clean. It was the least bad machine on the table. The feed seemed to know about the review cell after we created it. That sentence still feels ridiculous, but the transcripts show it. Future advisories began referencing public release boards, operator-only routing, and civilian trust thresholds. Either the future had always included the board because it knew we would form one, or the future was updating to include our choice. A scientist told me those two options might not be meaningfully separate from our point of view. I told him that was not helpful at all. He smiled without humor and said none of this was designed to be helpful. I appreciated the honesty. The first mass casualty report we partially prevented involved a bridge outside Louisville during a storm and a chain of wrong detours. The future segment gave a projected collapse after a barge impact and delayed inspection. It did not name private citizens, but it gave a time window and traffic load. We contacted Kentucky officials through present-day channels and got barge traffic slowed. Bridge inspections accelerated and truck routes adjusted without a public countdown. The bridge did not collapse. A support inspection found damage that could have become severe under load. That success should have built trust. Instead, because the collapse did not happen, millions of people decided the warning had been fake. Prevention is hard to prove to people who wanted spectacle. A week later, a city councilman in Georgia called me a fear merchant on live television. That same afternoon, his office quietly requested future flood data for his district. This was normal by then. Public disbelief and private dependence grew together. Police chiefs mocked future reports at press conferences, then asked for crime projections after midnight. Governors demanded transparency and then classified the parts that made them look unprepared. News outlets accused us of withholding information and then withheld their own leaked segments when the contents were too dangerous to air. Nobody was pure. I include myself in that. I had become the man deciding what tomorrow sounded like, and no human being should feel clean in that role. The feed did not only report disasters, that made it more dangerous in a different way. It carried ordinary future life, school lunch changes, highway repairs, heat advisories, a boil water notice in Tulsa, a snow closure in Denver, a missing dog reunited with its owner in Raleigh, a city council vote in Phoenix, a minor league baseball game delayed by lightning. Those items made the future feel survivable. They also tempted people to search for themselves. If the world still had school lunches 17 years ahead, maybe your child lived. If your town had road repairs, maybe it was not destroyed. If a missing dog came home, maybe mercy still existed. Hope became another thing people tried to extract from the feed before it was safe. I never searched for myself after hearing my future voice. That is true, but it is not as noble as it sounds. I did not search because I was afraid of finding something useful. Bad news can be endured if it is unavoidable. Useful bad news demands action. If I found a future report about my own death, would I avoid the place? Would avoiding it change the report? Would fear make me worse at my job? I had no family drama to wrap that in. It was just professional hygiene. A surgeon should not shake before cutting. A pilot should not stare at a crash forecast during takeoff. A host reading emergency instructions should not be privately counting the years left in his own file. Second national crisis came from money. It was always going to. A leaked future business segment named a cyber failure at a major payment processor. The segment was real but stale. It came from a future where a software update had failed during a holiday shopping period. Once the leak spread, companies froze updates. Banks changed routing, customers withdrew cash, and criminals launched copycat attacks against systems now running under emergency exceptions. The original event did not happen. A different one did. Payment delays hit stores across 5 states. Fuel stations went cash only in pockets. People blamed the future feed, then blamed banks, then blamed the government, then blamed us. They were not fully wrong about any of it. That night I read the hardest kind of correction. Not a correction of fact, a correction of certainty. I said a real future-dated segment had circulated without context. I said public reaction to that segment had changed the risk environment. I said the original projected failure had not occurred, but related failures had been triggered by defensive actions and opportunistic attacks. That is a mouthful, and people hate mouthfuls during fear, so I added the plain version. The leaked warning scared enough people into creating a different problem. That was the truth. The truth did not calm anybody fast, but it gave honest people a sentence they could repeat. From then on, our alerts used 3 labels: present confirmed, future-derived advisory, and future-derived advisory now stale. Those labels were clumsy, they worked. Present confirmed meant normal reporting from current sources. Future-derived advisory meant the feed had provided a claim that passed enough review to guide action. Future-derived advisory now stale meant the claim had been altered by events, intervention, or failed verification. We read the labels every time until listeners complained that I sounded repetitive. Repetition was the point. Panic loves gaps. If you leave a gap, someone fills it with a theory, a sales pitch, or a threat. Boring labels became sandbags. The third national crisis was trust. It came slower and hurt longer. People stopped believing timestamps. Videos from yesterday got labeled tomorrow. Old articles got recirculated with future dates. Real officials denied real documents because denial now had cover. Fake officials issued future warnings because some people would obey anything with a date stamp. Court cases were challenged because attorneys argued future knowledge had influenced decisions. Sports betting collapsed into lawsuits. Insurance contracts started adding temporal information clauses. Marriages cracked because one spouse wanted to move based on a future flood map and the other called it madness. Daily life had always depended on shared uncertainty about what came next. That shared uncertainty was damaged. Schools had to teach children how to read warnings. That may sound small. It was not. A teacher in Decatur sent us a classroom poster that said, A future report is not a promise. Ask who verified it. Ask what action helps. Ask what action hurts. I kept a copy taped near the board. Kids understood the practical part faster than adults because kids were not trying to profit, govern, or prove an ideology. If the report says a road may flood, do not stand in the road. If the report says a person may do something bad in 10 years, do not treat the person as guilty today. If the report says a market will move, remember someone may be using you. Simple, hard for adults. One of the future segments warned about a respiratory outbreak in parts of North Carolina and Virginia 6 months ahead. That was the first long-range public health decision. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention wanted the full segment sealed while researchers looked for present-day evidence. State health departments wanted enough detail to prepare hospitals. Public release could cause panic buying, false symptoms, and stigma against towns named in the report. Non-release could cost lives if the outbreak was real. The board argued for 13 hours. The final release did not name the projected first patient cluster. It funded hospital readiness, wastewater monitoring, protective equipment stock reviews, and public guidance about staying home when sick. 6 months later, a smaller outbreak occurred. Some called the response proof. Some called it manufactured. Both camps raised money from the argument. The feed never explained its origin in a way everyone accepted. Over time, the best working theory was not a machine in the future sending us messages from a clean laboratory. It was a damaged public emergency archive, or something connected to it, leaking backward through communication systems under conditions nobody could reproduce on command. The future segments were not personal letters. They were emergency products meant for public use in that future. That is why the format felt real. Weather, roads, hospitals, officials, casualty numbers, public service instructions, we were not receiving a grand message from our descendants. We were receiving their paperwork. That detail changed how I felt about the people 17 years ahead. At first, listeners imagined geniuses or tyrants or desperate survivors at a console choosing what to send. The audio did not support that. It sounded automated, compiled, and routed by systems built to keep emergency information moving when normal lines failed. Maybe people in the future had discovered the upstream leak and tried to shape it. Maybe no person controlled it. Maybe the archive was doing what emergency systems always do. Move warnings wherever a path exists. I found that more frightening than intention. A villain can be confronted. A system doing its job across time cannot be talked out of harm. The strangest confirmed save came from a small town outside Asheville. A future segment mentioned a landslide on a road that local officials already knew was vulnerable after heavy rain. The alert passed every rule, specific, near-term, actionable, low chance of making the event worse. We aired it as a present-day landslide risk based on current saturation and emergency review. The county closed the road. The slide came down 40 minutes later. No cars were on it. The video spread everywhere. For one day, people acted almost sane. They saw a practical warning, a practical action, and a practical result. Then arguments resumed because the human mind can turn even success into fuel. People asked me later why I kept using normal words. Why I did not call it time collapse, chronal crisis, temporal war, or whatever sounded big enough. The answer is that big words make people feel smart while they stop thinking. We were dealing with reports. Some were useful, some were stale. Some were fake. Some were dangerous because they were true in a future we were already changing. That language kept operators focused. A bridge did not care whether the warning came from tomorrow or a sensor. A hospital generator did not care whether the fuel delay was predicted by a future archive or a dispatcher with good instincts. The work stayed physical. Close the road, check the pump, clear the corridor, verify the caller, do not publish the name. The personal requests never stopped. We built systems to block them, but they still reached me. Parents mailed photographs. Spouses sent anniversaries and asked whether the future feed ever mentioned a trip, a crash, a diagnosis, a return flight. A man from Texas sent the same question every day for 8 months. Does my brother appear alive in any report after the storm season? I never answered because I could not safely search and because any answer would become a private future service. I know that sounds cruel. It was cruel. It was also necessary. The second we became a fortune desk for grief, the public safety mission would rot from inside. There were abuses. I will not pretend the process stayed clean because I was there. A contractor got early knowledge of a future infrastructure grant and bought land near a projected repair site. He was caught because a compliance analyst noticed the timing. A police officer used a restricted future crime advisory to pressure a man who had not committed a crime. That officer lost his badge after the recording came out. A hospital executive tried to use future outbreak language to secure funding while hiding present-day staffing failures. A federal aide leaked a stale storm projection to embarrass a governor. Every system built to handle the future became a system people tried to exploit in the present. We learned to publish abuse too. That was the only way to keep any trust. When a restricted segment was misused, we said so. When an advisory went stale, we said so. When our own board made a bad release, I read the correction myself. The worst was the Augusta evacuation mistake. We released a future-derived flood advisory too broadly, and people in the wrong neighborhoods left while people in the right low-lying streets did not get the message fast enough. Nobody died, but rescue crews pulled families from water they should have avoided. I read the correction at 5:30 the next morning, with mud still on. boots of the local responders being interviewed. I did not soften it. We had made the map too wide and the instruction too vague. That mistake changed our language again. We stopped saying area residence when we meant 3 streets. We stopped saying possible event when we meant a verified conditional risk. We stopped saying avoid travel when we meant do not take this road. Broad language feels safer to lawyers. It is not always safer to people. People need to know what to do with their hands, their cars, their phones, their kids, their work shift, their medication, their animals, their doors. Future information did not change that. It made it more important. The feed continued through the first month, then the second. It did not run constantly. It arrived in bursts, sometimes hours apart, sometimes silent for days. Bursts often followed major public reactions, which supported the contamination theory. When we disclosed responsibly, later segments got cleaner. When leaks spread, later segments grew contradictory. When federal officials overclassified, illegal leaks increased. When we published too broadly, public movement distorted the next reports. The pattern was not perfect, but it was strong enough to guide us. The future was not punishing us. The later reports were reflecting the consequences of how we listened. I remember the first ordinary morning after the initial crisis. It was a Wednesday 3 weeks in. No big future segment had arrived for 36 hours. Atlanta traffic was bad for normal reasons. A thunderstorm missed the city. A county board argued about zoning. A school bus broke down in Marietta. The national headlines were still full of investigations, hearings, lawsuits, and arguments over the feed, but for a few hours the work felt close to news again. Then a producer handed me a small future advisory about a house fire in East Point caused by a recalled space heater model. We checked present-day recall records. The model had a known wiring issue. We aired a general safety warning about that heater without naming the future address. Fire departments pushed it locally. The projected fire did not happen. Nobody noticed. That was the best kind of save. A prevented event with no public attention became our preferred result. That sounds backward for a newsroom. News wants attention. Emergency work wants compliance. If a warning keeps a road empty, there may be no dramatic footage. If a generator gets serviced, there may be no hospital crisis. If a woman is moved to safety, there may be no crime headline. The public often sees no event and suspects manipulation. I started reminding listeners that absence can be evidence of work, not proof of fraud. I said it too often. I had to. People raised on feeds and proof clips did not easily accept that the best outcome leaves almost nothing to watch. The first anniversary was ugly. Every outlet made specials. Every politician made a speech. Every crank sold a theory. Families of people lost in events we failed to prevent demanded raw archives. Families of people saved by quiet advisories defended the process. Courts were still deciding whether future-derived warnings could justify present-day searches, closures, and spending. Scientists had better measurements and no final explanation. Engineers had hardened systems, but the feed still entered through paths that should not exist. I spent that anniversary reading flood warnings in the morning and testimony in the afternoon. That felt right. The work did not pause for meaning. By then, the phrase before-time journalism had become popular, and I hated it. It made the work sound stylish. The work was not stylish. It was logging, calling, checking, arguing, withholding, correcting, and sleeping badly. It was telling a mother no. It was telling a governor no. It was telling a federal agent no. It was telling yourself no when your own future voice appeared in a segment marked for restricted review. It was accepting that every listener had a private reason to hate your boundary. It was trying to keep enough people alive that the future still had ordinary road repairs and school lunches in it. The strongest proof that the feed had changed us was not scientific, it was social. People began adding future-related conditions to decisions. Couples talked about whether to have children in a world where tomorrow might leak. Investors demanded temporal disclosure. Cities built future advisory offices. Emergency managers trained for stale reports. High schools taught verification drills. Police departments rewrote probable cause policies. Newsrooms built sealed review rooms. Churches preached against obsession with downstream names. Scam artists invented fake future certificates. Dating profiles joked about not wanting spoilers. Life did not stop. It got stranger, then routine, then strange again when a new burst arrived. 17 months after the first broadcast, we received a segment dated exactly 17 years ahead of that first night. It was short. It mentioned no disaster. It listed routine public notices from Atlanta, Nashville, Birmingham, and Charlotte. Then it played a message in my older voice, but this time the audio was clean and did not contradict itself. The message said the public release protocol had reduced major divergence in the first cascade period. It said downstream emergency archives still showed unstable branches around financial and political disclosure. It said casualty projection services remain prohibited. It said the highest survival value came from narrow, boring local action. Then it ended with a sentence I did not air for 6 hours. The sentence was addressed to me or to whoever had my job. It said, "Do not mistake access for duty." I sat with that one for half the day because it was the cleanest rule and the hardest one. A journalist hears information and feels pressure to publish. An emergency operator hears information and feels pressure to act. A frightened human hears information and feels pressure to know more. Access can feel responsible. Sometimes it is. Sometimes the responsible act is to close the file, call one bridge inspector, and say nothing to the crowd. That sentence became the line above our board, not because it solved everything, because it made every person pause before turning tomorrow into content. The political pressure peaked after the election cycle began. Campaigns wanted future debate clips, scandal notices, turnout projections, legal rulings, and crisis forecasts. We refused political future content almost completely unless it involved immediate public safety. That made both sides furious, which was the closest we got to fairness. A leaked stale segment claimed one candidate would suspend his campaign after a medical event. He did not. The rumors still shaped fundraising, attack ads, and turnout. Another segment, real and current, warned about a dangerous crowd crush risk at a rally after a venue change. We routed it through public safety channels and aired only crowd safety instructions. The rally ended without serious injury. The campaign later accused us of suppressing proof that it had been targeted by the future. People can survive a crisis and still choose vanity. There were quiet heroes, though I need to be careful with that word because it can make normal discipline sound rare. The railroad dispatcher in Ohio who treated a stale future derailment report as a reason to inspect, not panic. The nurse supervisor in Raleigh who kept staff from abandoning a hospital after a fake outbreak list. The county engineer in Kentucky who closed a bridge without waiting for a press conference. The school principal in Alabama who refused to release children into a blocked road because a parent rumor used tomorrow's date. The young producer on our desk who killed a leaked casualty clip before it reached air, even though it would have made every outlet chase us. These people did not solve time. They did their jobs under pressure. I am telling this now because people have started to forget the first lesson and keep only the habit. Future-derived advisories are part of public life now. That sentence should still sound insane, but it does not. Drivers accept stale future labels on highway signs. Hospitals run drills based on downstream risk. Farmers check long-range anomaly bulletins. Courts argue about temporal evidence. Newsrooms maintain review boards. Kids ask whether a report is present confirmed before adults do. The danger is that routine makes people lazy. The feed is not a calendar. It is not a gift. It is not a god. It is a stream of emergency information from conditions we can damage by touching it badly. If you were hearing this as a story, maybe that means the worst versions did not happen. Maybe it means they happened somewhere else, and this version kept enough lights on to keep talking. I do not know. I still do not claim to know what time is doing behind the reports. I know what people do with fear. I know what institutions do with advantage. I know what markets do with rumor. I know what families do with names. I know what roads do when everyone takes the same detour. I know what a hospital generator does when nobody checked the fuel pump because everybody was busy arguing about the philosophy of tomorrow. The last future segment I will describe came during another overnight shift, much later, when the room had newer screens, stronger locks, and younger producers who had been in school when the first broadcast arrived. It was raining over Atlanta again. Nothing severe, just steady water on the streets and brake lights along the downtown connector. The segment opened with routine closures, a ramp near Interstate 75, a boil water advisory in a small Georgia town, a shelter notice after an apartment fire in Birmingham. Then it carried one public line marked for unrestricted release. Continue narrow disclosure. Broad future publication remains a primary driver of preventable cascade events. That was all. No threat, no date drama. Just the same lesson written by people 17 years ahead, or by a system that had learned from us, or by a future still trying to remain possible. I read that line on air after we verified the surrounding notices through present-day channels. I did not dress it up. I did not call it historic. I said it once, then gave the weather, the road closures, the shelter address, and the number for non-emergency storm assistance. That is how this work should sound. Useful, limited, human. We do not save the world by knowing everything ahead of time. We save pieces of it by knowing what to do next and by refusing to turn every warning into a weapon. So if a future report ever reaches you, do not treat it as sacred. Do not sell it. Do not build your whole life around one line from a future report that may already be changing because you heard it. Ask what is verified. Ask what action helps. Ask what action hurts. Ask who benefits from your reaction. If the answer is that a bridge needs closing, close the bridge. If the answer is that a family wants a name from a list nobody can verify, protect the family from the list. If the answer is that a market can be moved, assume someone is trying to move you. And if the answer is only that you want to know, sit with that discomfort. Curiosity is not always duty. That first night began with Cortlandt Street and falling glass that had not fallen yet. It became markets, hospitals, police lines, power grids, courtrooms, classrooms, and families waiting for names no one should have promised. The future did not arrive with a single command. It arrived as public information, the most ordinary material in any newsroom delivered from the wrong point in time. That is why it nearly destroyed public trust, not because people saw the end, because people saw enough of the next step to fight over who had the right to act on it first. I still sit down before every restricted segment with the same rule. Specific, near-term, actionable, does not create the event. No private names unless public safety leaves no other path. That rule is not perfect. Nothing about this process is perfect. But it kept Atlanta from tearing itself open during the first cascade, kept hospitals powered, kept bridges empty, kept some homes from burning, kept some families from getting a knock at the door. It also left people angry, grieving, suspicious, and convinced we had hidden the one thing that would have saved them. Some of them may be right. That is the part no protocol can remove. The feed is quiet tonight. Rain is moving east. Traffic is slow but normal. A crew is repairing a water main near Decatur. A shelter is open in Macon after a small apartment fire. Present confirmed. No future-derived advisory attached. That is my favorite kind of night now. Not peaceful. Just ordinary enough that people can make choices without a future report forcing itself into the decision. I do not trust that kind of quiet completely. I never will again, but I can work inside it. For now, that is enough.